This is the new 2023 Cadillac Escalade V, and it's a lot of things. Huge, one, luxurious, two, but those have always been true of the Escalade. But now there's the Escalade V, which is fast also. 680 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, almost 700 horsepower in a Cadillac Escalade. It's just insane. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it with no fees or cost to you. And we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this Audi R8 GT sold for $110,000, this gorgeous Dodge Viper brought over $77,000, and this wonderful Chevy Corvette Z06 sold for just under $25,000. We love the C5 Z06 on Cars and Bids. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it, with daily auctions and great selection at carsandbids.com. So let's talk Escalade V. Like I said, a high-performance version of the Cadillac Escalade, which sounds insane, but there are other big SUVs with big power. You have the Mercedes-AMG GLS 63, for example, with 600 horsepower, the Dodge Durango SRT Hellcat with 710 horsepower, and of course the Tesla Model X with over 1,000 horsepower. Big, powerful SUVs are now a thing, apparently, and this is Cadillac's entrant into that world, and today I'm going to review it. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the new Escalade V and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. All right, time for the quirks and features, the new Escalade V, and I'm going to start with the most important thing, and that is the powertrain. The Escalade V uses a big V8, just like the regular Escalade, but here it's supercharged. So this is basically the same engine in the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing, which is one of the most powerful sedans you can buy, except the Escalade actually has even more power, and that's because this has a larger supercharger. So the V Blackwing is, I think, 668 horsepower. This is 682 horsepower in a Cadillac Escalade, making this the most powerful Cadillac of all time. It also has around 650 pound-feet of torque, massive numbers for a massive SUV. But the Escalade's big engine and huge power help to kind of diminish its size because everything works together to put down some amazing numbers. Cadillac says 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds, which is wild, and the quarter mile in 12.7 seconds with 110 mile-an-hour trap speed. Absolutely crazy numbers. Now, it should be pointed out those figures are for the shorter wheelbase version of the Escalade. The V is also offered as a long wheelbase ESV model, which this is, and Cadillac says expect about 1/10 of a second slower 0 to 60 and in the quarter mile if you get the long wheelbase model, but still low to mid 4-second 0 to 60 in a Cadillac Escalade. Now, a couple of things worth pointing out with the Escalade V. For one thing, they're all standard with all-wheel drive, so you can't get this giant power in rear-wheel drive and do smoky full-size SUV burnouts. All-wheel drive is standard on all. Also, worth pointing out, under the hood, you have this cool little plaque on the top of the engine that shows exactly who hand-built this particular V8. Cadillac calls this the builder's badge, and it's kind of cool to see it there, showing a little pride in this particular engine and who built it. But anyway, more interesting items to cover with the Escalade V. For one thing, pricing. Cadillac says this will start around $150,000 if you get the short wheelbase version, or around $153,000 if you get the long wheelbase Escalade V ESV like this one is. Massive, massive pricing, especially considering a regular Escalade starts around $78,000 to $80,000. And even if you step all the way up to the top of the line Platinum model, that's like $105,000. So this this is $150 to $155. That is huge money. And frankly, it's even huge money compared to rivals. The Mercedes-AMG GLS 63 is another full-size 3-row high-performance SUV, and even that starts around $130,000, but it only has 600 horsepower. Now, the Tesla Model X Plaid offers 1,000 horsepower, and it starts around $140,000. So this is more expensive than both, and it doesn't really have the brand name of Mercedes-Benz nor the performance of the Tesla, but Cadillac reckons people are gonna pay. In fact, Cadillac told me that 60% of Escalade buyers don't even cross-shop another vehicle. They simply want an Escalade, and so Cadillac figures that's gonna translate to the V model even at this really high price. And by the way, one other interesting thing Cadillac told me, 80% of Escalade sales are the short wheelbase version, only 20% are the long wheelbase ESV like this model, and Cadillac expects that split to continue even on the Escalade V. But anyway, next up, let's talk through some other upgrades to the Escalade V beyond just its price and performance. One came to the suspension. This has Cadillac's excellent magnetic ride suspension, which is fantastic, and Cadillac told me they had to do a lot of suspension tuning in order to make the V come out how they want it. The goal was to kind of minimize body roll and float, make it handle better in corners, and so a lot of different suspension work went into the Escalade V to make it perform and handle a little better. Of course, stopping power also had to be improved from the standard Escalade, since this is a massive vehicle with now massive horsepower, and so Cadillac put Brembo brakes on the Escalade V. You can see them here, and they are huge up front. Cadillac says over 16-inch brake rotors up front, which is really, really big, but it makes sense because, again, a huge vehicle with huge power also needs huge stopping power. And there are quite a few other upgrades to the V as well. One is these wheels. These are 22-inch wheels, believe it or not. They don't look that big since this vehicle is so massive, but they are indeed 22-inch wheels, and they come standard on the Escalade V, a distinctive design just for this model. And in fact, if you look closely, you can see on just one wheel spoke a little V graphic, which is kind of cool. You gotta look closely and you gotta know what you're looking for, but it's there. And there are other upgrades to the outside of the V. Probably the most noticeable is up front, where the grille and the entire front fascia has been all enlarged for better airflow. The grille is huge, the area below the grille is huge. You even have these larger sort of side vertical inlets to get air in. And unlike in a lot of modern cars, none of this is fake. None of it is for style and partially blocked off because they don't need the airflow. Cadillac told me everything was enlarged for functionality. They need the air to get into this engine to make all that power. And that's especially true for towing. Cadillac says this Escalade V can tow up to 7,000 pounds, which is a respectable number. And if you're towing a big trailer and boat, you need to suck in as much air as possible, hence these massive openings up front. Now, along the side of the new Escalade V, not that many changes compared to a standard Escalade, although you do have a rather large V badge on the door, as you can see. You got this on both sides to let bystanders know exactly what this is, although they'll probably be able to figure it out pretty quickly anyway because of the exhaust. That's the big upgrade in the rear. You can see a quad exhaust, which is massive, and it sounds fantastic. Take a listen to a couple of revs from a Cadillac Escalade. So the exhaust sounds pretty good for a full-size luxury SUV, but another cool thing about the exhaust is there are different modes where you can dial up or down the sound. You just heard sport mode, that was those revs, which sounds great. There's also a tour mode, which is sort of like normal, and there's also a stealth mode that you can put it into, and if you go into that, it's super quiet. That's like if you're driving out of your neighborhood in the morning before everybody's up and you don't want to wake anybody, you go into stealth mode until you're out on the main road, and then you go back into sport. Pretty cool, different levels of exhaust. Now, you can dial up those levels of exhaust by pressing the V button, which is located right here in the center next to the shifter. You press that and it puts the Escalade V into V mode, which is a high-performance, sporty drive mode. As you can see, all of these different items are now in like an especially sporty setting for high-performance Escalade driving. It's also worth noting that going into V mode lowers the Escalade by about an inch to get it lower to the ground for a better better handling experience. Now, there are quite a few different drive modes in this vehicle, and you can access the rest of them to the left of the steering wheel by pressing this mode button. You press that, and you can cycle through the different drive modes, and you can also see exactly how all of the different systems are affected by each drive mode. Some are obviously way more conservative than others, and some are absolutely crazy. But V mode is the most high-performance, aggressive, exciting drive mode, and you access it specially by pressing that button in front of the shifter. And it's worth pointing out it's also configurable, so you can dial up not just the exhaust, but various other different items in V mode. For example, if you want the softest suspension setting, but also the fastest acceleration, you can do that with V mode. But anyway, next up, beyond V mode, there are a few other changes to the Escalade V over the standard Escalade. For one thing, the key is red, as you can see, and they do that to match the color of the brake calipers. This is kind of a hallmark touch from Cadillac V. Whatever color your calipers are is also matched to your key, which is kind of a cool little Easter egg. Now, other than that, the red key, there are other ways to distinguish an Escalade V from a standard model. One is this little tag at the bottom of the steering wheel. You can see V, which reminds you what you're driving. You also have a little badge to the left of the steering wheel, again saying V for the high-performance V model, and that's it. There's no other V-specific stuff in this interior, which is crazy. In fact, I think this is the least badged high-performance car interior that I can ever remember being inside. There's just not all that much V in here. For example, on the door sill, it says Escalade, not Escalade V. You don't have some aggressive sports seat and the V badge on the seat back. Instead, you just have a standard Escalade seat and Cadillac's little V logo they use in all Escalade models. You also don't have like carbon fiber trim in here and Alcantara. Instead, you can see the dashboard is all dark wood and stitched leather. None of that sports stuff you might be expecting in a V model. And it's kind of surprising. This interior, despite being the Escalade V, is pretty much just the Escalade Platinum. Now, if you're into high performance cars, this might disappoint you a little bit. Where are your sports seats, your Alcantara, your V badges everywhere? But I suspect Cadillac has done this very, very intentionally. I suspect their market research has showed them that people who buy cars like this want the performance of a V model, but the luxury of a regular Escalade. And so that is exactly what Cadillac has delivered. People who buy the CT5V Blackwing want their sports seats and carbon fiber everywhere, but Escalade buyers just aren't like that. They want the power, they want the performance, and they want the luxury. And so that's what Cadillac has delivered. So let's talk about that luxury for a second, because in this interior, there are some amazing touches unrivaled by basically anybody else. And frankly, there are some drawbacks too. But the most amazing touch is the screen situation. Cadillac says 38 inches of screen in the new Escalade. And really, it's broken up into 3 screens. You have the center infotainment touchscreen like you do in a lot of cars, sort of curved and tilted towards the driver. Then you have your gauge cluster screen, as you can see. A lot of cars have that now. This one is especially large, but that's your second screen in a screen. And then you have a third screen over to the left of all this that sort of has a few detail items and information and controls. So that's your big 38-inch screen. You take it as a whole and you can see it's one big piece of curved screen taking up the majority of the dashboard, just dominating this interior and providing all the technology you could want. And indeed, there are quite a few crazy technology features with the new Escalade. One is augmented reality navigation. You can set the gauge cluster screen to show, well, right now it just looks like a camera showing what you can see out the windshield. Not all that helpful. But if you set a navigation destination, this camera will actually show where you need to turn in real time. So you can see I'm approaching an intersection. It has arrows on the screen telling me where to turn, which makes destination finding a lot easier. You don't have to figure out, oh, is this the right street? It actually shows it in real time on what you're physically seeing live, which is pretty cool. Now, in this gauge cluster screen, you can also do a full screen map, which is a nice feature to have, or you can do a night vision system, which uses heat seeking to show you what's in front of you. It kind of makes it easier if you're driving on a rural road at night. You can avoid deer or pedestrians in the dark. That also is a cool feature. Now, the little screen to the left of the gauge cluster screen is actually actually also a touchscreen, even though it's really small. This one controls what screen you're seeing in your gauge cluster, so you can select from the different items there, and it also shows you a trip odometer, as you can see, or you can just flip it over to a dark screen if you don't want any more information from all of this screen stuff. But anyway, the final touchscreen in this interior is the one in the center, and it is fantastic. Very large, like I said before, and it works great. Tremendously responsive to the touch, very intuitive. I like the fact that the home screen shows several different items, your music, your navigation, your phone. You can basically make it do pretty much whatever you want. It's very easy to use, very simple, and I like it quite a bit. You got a really good screen and technology combination in this car, absolutely world class in the newest Escalade. And of course, there is more. Cadillac says this vehicle has a 36 speaker stereo system from a company called AKG, which they speak very highly of. I'm not an audiophile, but I guess they're a premium brand name. 36 speakers is an enormous amount. In fact, there are speakers pretty much everywhere you look, including in some rather quirky places. The headrests have speakers, as you can see. The driver headrest, two kind of going around your head near your ears, and same deal over on the passenger side, headrest speakers. And how about the fact that basically the entire dashboard is a speaker? The upper dash, these little lines are there because you have speakers all throughout that area of the car to maximize your acoustic experience. In fact, there are so many speakers in this car that the passenger can turn down the volume for just their seat in the interior. Go into the infotainment system, you can adjust only the passenger volume. Now, I have no idea if this actually makes any difference for what you're listening to, but if the passenger wants to take a nap or doesn't want to hear the driver's music quite as loudly, you can turn down passenger volume only, which is crazy. And other nice luxury touches in here. For one thing, the rear view mirror, you can see right now it's a mirror, but if you flip this switch, it is a camera, which is a fantastic feature. More and more cars are starting to offer this, and I love this because, especially in a big SUV, you don't have to be looking through your entire interior to see behind you. You get a great view behind you with a camera mounted back behind all of that stuff. Another nice luxury benefit of the Escalade V is it's offered with Supercruise, which is Cadillac's excellent driver assist system that is completely hands-off if you're on a mapped road. And most interstate highways in North America are mapped roads. You can be totally hands-off, and the car will steer, accelerate, brake for you as long as you're looking forward and into this camera that's mounted here in the center of the steering wheel. Now, the newest version of Supercruise, which is included in this car, can even change lanes for you. So if you're driving fast, coming up behind somebody, it will shift over to the left in order to pass them, which is a pretty cool idea. The drawback to this is it has some work that still needs to be done. For one thing, it'll change lanes into HOV lanes, thinking it's just a left passing lane, so it can't tell the difference between a left lane and an HOV lane, which is kind of disappointing. Also, it's not incredibly predictive. If you're coming up on a car going slowly, but there's a car further ahead in the left lane going even slower, it'll switch into the left lane and then get stuck behind that car, which isn't really ideal. But it's the beginning of a system that will start to go around slower cars, and that's a pretty nice touch. Next up, another nice benefit of this interior, the wireless charger in here, is this. This little hole in the center console is an upright vertical wireless charger. You stick your phone in here and it will charge. Most automakers have like a flat tray, but the problem is that takes up a lot of space and your phone can kind of get jostled around while you're driving. Not so in here. There are little rubberized pieces to keep your phone in place and charging while you're driving along, and that is a nice idea. One other cool benefit in here, you can drop or raise the third row seats from the front. You have these little buttons in the ceiling you can press and lower the third row from up here, and you can raise it back up again too. This is a really nice feature. You're picking up your kids, you forgot you had lowered the seats for some cargo item a couple of weeks ago, and you got to put them back up. You don't have to climb out, go to the back of the car, put them up from there. You can do it from the front seat, which is nice to see. And it's worth pointing out, these seats go up and down fast, which is kind of a drawback of some of these power folding seats. Yeah, you only press a button instead of pulling a latch, but they're slow to operate. Not so in this car. You press this button and they drop quickly and they go back up quickly, which is nice to see. But with that said, some amazing technology in this interior, some amazing features rivaling the very best luxury cars on the planet. You do have drawbacks in this interior, specifically the materials quality. Now, there's a lot of gorgeous stitched leather and aluminum trim and dark wood, and that all looks very nice, but what about this center console area? It's just a bunch of cheap looking plastic buttons, and frankly, a really cheap looking and cheap feeling shifter also. These things just don't seem right in the Escalade, and it's a shame, and you have it in other places too. The controls in the steering wheel, you can see kind of a cheap looking plastic certainly looks out of place at this price point. And same deal over on the door panel. All the controls here, the heated and cooled seats, the power windows, power locks, all look like kind of cheap, crappy plastic. Probably the worst offender though is the turn signal and windshield wiper stalks, which feel flimsy and feel cheap and are totally disappointing for a vehicle at this price point. It's just not really acceptable and not really ideal. The problem is that Cadillac has one set of switchgear for all of its vehicles, from the $38,000 CT4 on up to the now $150,000 Escalade V. And you can get away with this stuff at the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, maybe $80,000 price point, but at $150,000, you're competing against Bentley, Mercedes-Benz top models. You can't have cheap plastic like this, and it's just a shame they have this stuff in the Escalade. But anyway, next up we move on to the back seat in the Escalade V, and I have to say, it is huge, just like in the regular Escalade. Lots of room for legs, hips, knees, head, very big rear seat back here, very comfortable, and captain's chair set up in the back, so two separate seats with like a hole in the middle that makes it easier to access the third row. Talk more about third row access in a second, but first, more second row items. For one thing, you do have a climate control zone back here, so you can adjust the rear temperature and change the fan speed, direct the airflow, all that sort of stuff. And you also have heated rear seats back here, which is a nice luxury touch in the back seat of a nice luxury SUV. Now, below all that, you have this little panel that pops out with cup holders. You press that, it pops out, and you can stick your drinks. And below that, you have a few charge ports, as you can see, along with HDMI ports for the rear screens back here. And you also have a household style power outlet back here, which is really nice to have. You just pop that open and you can plug in a laptop or perhaps a blender. Now, the most interesting thing in the back seat in this vehicle is unquestionably the rear screens. This has a rear seat entertainment system, and these are touch screens, which you don't always see. A lot of times controlled by remote. That's cheaper and easier for the automakers, but here you have rear touch screens, and you have Hulu built in. You tap here, you go into Hulu, and then you can use your account to watch stuff on Hulu rather than having to plug in some device. Although worth pointing out, you can also do that with the HDMI ports I showed you earlier. But that's your rear seat entertainment system in the back of the new Escalade. But anyway, next we move on to the third row in the Escalade V, which is very easily accessible with two pulls, this lever on the side of the second row. First pull folds the seat down, as you can see, and the second pull folds it up, which creates a big pathway for you to climb into the third row, which I will do right now. Very easy and simple to get into the third row, except that folding the seat all the way up is kind of annoying with car seats. So you have a car seat in place, you'd have to remove it just to get into the third row, which is annoying. But there's one cool benefit that the Escalade offers, and that would be this second row seat can slide forward or backward, meaning if you want to get into the third row, you can slide the second row all the way back to give you some room to pass it, and then you can climb into the third row through the gap between the two seats in the middle, which allows for easiest third row access, and that is pretty neat. Sliding forward or backward second row seats, don't always see that, but you do have it here. Now, in the third row in the new Escalade V, you don't have a ton of room, but it is reasonably spacious, a huge SUV, and you could get adults back here for reasonably long trips, and of course children would be comfortable back here. But aside from passenger room, there's not really all that much interesting in the third row. It is worth pointing out you do have two more USB-C chargers here, one on each side, which is nice to see. A lot of big SUVs only have one in the third row or none at all, so it's neat to have two different third row device chargers in back. I like that. Also worth pointing out, when you want to climb out of the third row, it is quite easy. You just push this button over on the side, and then the second row seat folds forward, and then you grab on this little loop and you can lift it up the rest of the way, and then you can climb right out. Or of course, you can just go between the seats like I showed you earlier and just walk right out of the second row. But anyway, next up, moving on to the back of the new Escalade V. A couple of interesting things back here. For one, I like the fact that you can still open up the glass independently of the tailgate. There's a little popper in the tailgate. You press it and you can open up the glass. And that way, if you want to put in some smaller item, you don't want to open up the entire big tailgate, you can just toss it in and then close the glass and it's all pretty easy. But if you do want to open up the full tailgate, check this out. You press the Cadillac logo in back and then it pops open. Take another look at that. You push the Cadillac crest and that is your tailgate popper in the back of the Escalade, which I think is a pretty cool little hidden quirk. But next you move into the cargo area back here and you can see it is huge. Even with 3-row seating, you still have a massive cargo area in the back of the full-size Escalade ESV V. And there are a few benefits even beyond the massive cargo room back here. For one thing, it's easy to put down the seats. You have buttons here that allow you to drop or raise the 3rd row seats. And again, they go up and down very quickly and it's very easy to do. You can put them down for more cargo space or put them up if you want to put passengers in them. And you also have buttons back here to drop the 2nd row seats. Push that and the 2nd row goes down. Now, you can't raise the 2nd row from here. You got to go around and raise them up individually, but it's nice to be able to lower them from the cargo area if you're trying to stick in some huge item back here. Also worth pointing out, near all that stuff, under this cover, you have a household style outlet, which is nice to have, so you can charge devices back here too, in addition to the household outlet in the 2nd row. I love seeing those inside cars, really helpful and useful. Also cool back here, there's even more cargo space if you want it underneath the floor. You lift up the cargo floor and you can see a little bit of extra space in case there's some smaller, fragile item that you don't want just rolling around in the cargo area. Now it's under the floor and a little bit more secure and private. But that basically covers the interior of the new Escalade. I also want to talk very briefly about the exterior. I've mentioned some of the V changes already, but another interesting, distinctive quirk in the Escalade is its taillight situation. These massive vertical taillights, which have been a hallmark of the Escalade for several years now. They're still on the new model, and they are still massive and vertical, as you can see. And the front has them now too. The running lights up front are now these massive vertical pieces that I think are designed to kind of remind people of the rear lights, which have become so distinctive to the Escalade. You can see when you put on the turn signal, it also becomes this massive vertical piece in front. So the front and rear both have these big vertical lights. Aside from that interesting exterior quirk, not really all that much to talk about. The Escalade V on the outside really mostly just looks like an Escalade, aside from the wheels, the bigger brakes, the quad exhaust, and the redesigned front end. Not as many changes to this as you have to most performance or Cadillac V vehicles. And so that's a thorough tour of the quirks and features of the brand new 2023 Cadillac Escalade V. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Escalade V. When I first heard about this thing, first off, I've been surprised they haven't made one sooner. These high-performance SUVs, Mercedes has been making a GL63, now GLS63, for almost 10 years now. And, you know, the Hellcat Durango and the Model X, and it just seemed like it made some sense, but Cadillac never touched it, even as they were developing the V lineup. And you would think they would want like their new performance line to kind of filter to their most popular model, but I guess they just didn't think it made sense in a big SUV. But they've been able to do it now, and boy, have they. Okay, so let's let it rip. Whew. Quick shift. Wow. That was pretty quick. Now, it's not like insane. It doesn't like throw you back in your seat like a Model X Plaid, to be totally honest. But you certainly do feel it. Whew. The shifts are very quick. That's one of the most surprising things, is just how boom, boom, fast it's shifting. It almost feels like a dual clutch, but it isn't. You have amazing sound. I mean, that's really the crazy thing here. I mean, it just sounds absolutely wildly insane and performance-y and fast, and you really have like a really seriously muscular sound. I did an exhaust rev for you a little bit ago, but this is one of those stupid cars where you can't rev it past 4,000 RPM when you're in park, so you can't really get to hear it. But I mean, you can hear it now. It is loud and cool. But of course, you also have that mode, that stealth mode that you can put it in if you don't want it to be so loud. Now, interestingly, yeah, from an acceleration standpoint, it feels fast, but it's not like totally insane. Two reasons for that. Number one is it's just big, and I mean, that's just a reality. You can only make a huge car so fast. They say 0-60 in 4.4. That seems about accurate to me, but it certainly isn't like 3, you know? It doesn't quite feel that level of crazy. It's fast. It's very fast for an Escalade. It's very fast for a full-size SUV, and you can really kind of go places quick, and that's kind of nice. but I wouldn't say that it's not like throw you back in your seat, high-performance sports car fast. Nonetheless, it does feel like a lot of fun, and it's incredibly enjoyable to jam the throttle down and hear it and feel it take off. It just doesn't feel like it should be physically possible with a vehicle this size. Now, another reason why I don't think it quite feels as fast as it is, frankly, is you're just so insulated. You're high up, you're in this luxurious vehicle. You hear the exhaust, but other than that, sports cars, you feel every bump and you start to feel the road going faster and hear the tires, and you don't hear that here, which is actually a benefit of this car. Like, it's nice and it's luxurious and it's insulated and it feels nice and luxurious. Now, I've already reviewed the regular Escalade, so I'm not going to get too much into that, but I do want to say the interior in here is just fantastic. The quality could be improved, and that is consistently a disappointment that I have with General Motors. It just doesn't seem like they quite know how to make a great luxury vehicle. But one thing they really know how to do is pack things full of features. They don't quite get there on the materials, but they make up for it by just throwing in stuff you can't get in other vehicles. And so you have this massive screen, including the augmented reality. You have the fantastic Supercruise system, and it's really, really impressive just how loaded this vehicle is. One other thing I want to talk handling. Is this a sports car? Absolutely not, but it is much better than a regular full-size luxury SUV and much better than the standard Escalade. It obviously, again, no sports car, but it's flatter than you'd expect through corners, and I'm kind of surprised. I don't necessarily want to call it sporty, especially in terms of steering. Steering is still pretty slow and over-assisted, but handling is like not so bad. It's relatively flat, it's very predictable. You don't quite feel the weight as much as I would think that you do. But last thing, I want to talk price, 150 grand, which is about $50,000 more than a Platinum, which has basically all the same equipment. So you're paying basically 50 grand for the extra power. Is it worth it? I don't know. It's a bit of a tough sell to me, considering that's a lot of money for an Escalade. I mean, it's a crazy number. And GLS 63 is a very compelling vehicle, and so is the Model X Plaid. But there are just going to be a lot of people who simply want the best of the best Escalade and are going to be thrilled that now they can get one with 700 horsepower. And so, power to them. I mean, I get it. It's cool, it's fun, it's fast, but it does seem quite expensive for what it is. But I suspect they're going to sell because there's a buyer segment out there who just wants the best, the fastest, the coolest. And in the Escalade world, this is that. And so that's the new 2023 Cadillac Escalade V. This is a seriously ridiculous vehicle, boasting massive power and performance for a full-size luxury SUV. And frankly, if you want it all, this delivers. Interior room, performance, power, acceleration, technology, it's got everything. Just be prepared to pay, both when you buy the Escalade V and at the pump. But anyway, now it's time to give the new Escalade V a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 66 out of 100, which places the Escalade V here against some similar cars. The Escalade V is an interesting one, as it's sort of a high-performance vehicle and a luxury vehicle, touting massive power in that gorgeous Escalade Platinum interior. It beats out other full-size SUVs in terms of performance, and it beats out other performance SUVs in terms of luxury. And it does a good job of combining both, but it all comes at a pretty significant cost, both in terms of purchase price and fueling.